So what you're doing, you have independent producers. I'm going to grossly oversimplify. You have people who can print money and people who can earn money. They can produce, okay? What you're trying to do is bust these people so they're financially dependent, and then they need your printed money, and then they have to do what you say. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So and here's what's important to understand. If you understand the consolidation of the financial coup, you're watching the central bankers take control of the treasury departments. So they've had the sovereign governments issue more and more bonds, and the sovereign governments are now dependent on the central banks to buy the bonds. And now the central bankers are moving in and essentially putting their people in place to control the treasuries. And so you have central banks that are owned privately by private people who are invisible relatively, now taking control not just of the money creation, but of the governments that depend on the central bank to buy their bonds. Now, the big secret in all of this, and one of the reasons they're so aggressive right now, is if you understand how the system works, the reality is we don't need them.
Yeah.
We don't need them to create our money.
Yeah.
We don't need them to control our data. We don't need them to run our governments. We don't need any of that. Mm-hmm. Now, what has happened, and which is why it's so important, Wolfgang, what you brought up, for the last 30, 40 years, they have always been able to buy most of the dissenters or the independent efforts against them with money. In other words, they have, in the democracies, they have bought the population off again and again.
They bought even Transparency International.
Right. And the question, you know, so just if you look at my journey over the last 30 years, whenever allies show up, my question is, okay, you know, how are they going to buy that person away? What are they going to, you know, and they do, no, they buy almost everybody away. And the problem is if you have an ally who's got 3 young children and is trying to, you know, manage a household, and they come and they offer them, you know, a couple $100,000 a year doing something for Harvard, you know, off they go because they have a fiduciary obligation to their family. So these guys, that's why we did the deep state tactics. They're fabulous at buying almost everybody. And it's a very rare person that they can't buy. And one of the things they've done with all the money they print is to try and buy everyone into institutions and organizations that keep them busy and away from the real power lines. Yeah. The beauty of what's happened now is suddenly, I had one wonderful, I was in Basel for the World Freedom Alliance, and there was one wonderful member who said, you know, friends are turning up everywhere. Because we've reached a point where I think you have a lot of intelligent thinking people who realized, wait a minute, you know, some things are not a function of price. And if you look at what the destruction of human civilization and the destruction of all that's sacred or wise, you know, what these guys are doing is, you know, what we're selling down the river here is the future of human civilization. And, you know, and there are too many intelligent, educated people who know that that's a liquidation. That's not a business.
Also Wolfgang had, yeah.
I think it's very encouraging what you just said, that we don't need them.
We don't need them.
And I think the most important thing is when I imagine, I have a dream, I may say it like this, when the people just take off the mask, when they just open their shops, when they just go on doing what they always did, those people would stand there with open mouth, wouldn't understand, they would no longer be important. We could just go on living as we did before. We have to change a lot of things.
Yes.
But we could do this in a democratic way, and if we have some time to do it, we have to change things. We have to hinder them to do such things happen again. So the decentralization of money, I think, is very important.
Yes.
The decentralization of health is very important.
Yes.
There are many things we can arrange in a regional perspective, and that. If you have it in a regional perspective, this is just important for democracy, because democracy only functions when there is transparency.